In this video, we're going to be talking about comparison operators. So we're going to compare certain numbers or strings to each other to see are they the same. And if they're the same, then we're going to get a Boolean output as true. And if they're not the same, we're going to get a Boolean output as false. So to start off with, let's just go and create two variables. So we can call our first variable var1 and we'll set it just equal to the number 1. And we'll have a second variable and we'll call it var2, and we're also going to set it to 1, but we're going to set it to a string that has 1 inside of it. So if we go and compare these to see if they're both equal to each other, we should get the output as false because one of them is a number and the other one is a string. Even though they both contain the number 1, it's not the same. So let's just print out var1, and the first thing we want to do is check to see if it's equal. So to do this, we don't use one equal sign because a single equal sign is used for assignment. So we have to use a second equal sign. And then we just compare var1 with var2, and if we run this, we get the answer false, which is what we would expect because one of these variables is a string and the other one is a number, so they're completely different. Now, in some programming languages, if you done this and you're to compare these two variables, we'd actually get true. So in JavaScript, for example, if we were to do this, we'd actually get a true statement because it treats all its variables, and no matter if it's a number or if it's a string, it treats them the same. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are using JavaScript. But if we were to change this to actually number 1, and we were to check this again, we can see that we get a true statement. So that's what we would expect because these two numbers are true. And if we were to use a completely random number for variable 2, like 34, we get it to become false again. So the next thing we want to look at is, comparing two variables that are not equal. So we're assuming that they're not equal. So in this example here, this variable 1, this variable 2, these are not equal. So what we can do is we can actually just copy this and we'll keep all of our statements as we're going through this tutorial. And if we use exclamation mark and an equals, and we run this, we can see that we get our answer as true because it's asking, is variable 1 not equal to variable 2? And variable 1 is not equal to variable 2. So it is correct, it's true. Now the next thing we want to look at is greater than and less than signs. So this is probably pretty straightforward. So you'd have seen this in maths, so you'd have a number. So in this case, we're just going to use our variables again. So we'll have var1 and var2, and we want to check to see if var1 is less than var2. So var1 is less than var2, so this should give us a true statement. And we can see our statement here is true. But if we had something like this, we had something that was like the number 2, and we wanted to check to see if it's less than the number 2. The number 2 is not less than the number 2. So if we were to go and run this, we'd get false. Now, what we can do is we can check to see if it's less than, a number like 2 or equal. So we can do that by saying the same thing, but having an equals after our less than sign. So if we were to run this now, we'd get the answer true because we're asking if 2 is less than 2 or if it's equal to 2, and we get our answer as true. And something quite similar we can do for the greater than sign. So if we were just to flip these signs here, so we'll change that from a less than to a greater than, and we change that from less than to a greater than. And if we go and run this here, you can see the first one we look at here is 2 greater than 2. and we can see it shows up as false because 2 is not greater than 2, the same way that 2 is not less than 2, it's actually equal to 2. And for this one here, we're checking to see if 2 is greater than 2 or it's equal to 2. And again, similar to our less than sign, it is equal, so we get our true statement here. So I'm going to go and delete all this here, and you might find it easy enough, or you can follow it well when we're just using simple numbers like this and we're talking through it. But this is not the way it's going to be when we're developing our programs. We're not going to have this. We're going to have something like this. There's going to be multiple different variables. Let's say we have n1 and it's equal to 5. Then we have n2 and it's equal to 70. Then we have n3 and it's equal to 8, let's say. And then you're going to have something like this. You mightn't have a print statement. You might have what they call a conditional statement. So that's maybe like an if or an else statement, or you might even have a loop. And we're going to get into them conditional statements and loops in the next coming videos, but we're just going to use print for now. And you could have something like this. You could have something like is n1 less than, let's say, n3, and then that's going to be either true or false. So let's just go and run that and see what we get. So we see that this is true. So n1, which is 5, is less than n3. Okay, so 5 is less than 8, so we can see how that would be true. And then you can use other things, like for example, we can use and or. So we could say and then n3 is greater than n2. And we can put this in round bracket as well, just to clean it up a little bit. So if we were to go and run this, we get false. And we said before that this is true because n3, which is 8, is less than n1, which is 5. So that's grand. This bit here is true. And then when we go and look at this, we can see that n3, which is 8, is greater than n2. So that's false. So we can see that this is true and this is false. And then we've got this AND operator. So with an AND operator, both of the statements have to be true for the final statement, so this one that we see here. But these are not both true, so that's why we get false. Now there's another operator that we could use, which is not AND, but is OR. And if we were to run this, you can see that we get the opposite output value. We get true. And that's because once one of these statements, either this one or this one, is true, our final statement that we can see here in our output is true. So it's important that you just go and do a couple of examples yourself just to get used to all the different operators, so that when you see it, you'll be much quicker to come to an answer.